Hello and welcome to a new SiLA Python tutorial. My name is Mark Dörr and I'm maintainer of the SiLA Python repository and GitLab. Today I would like to talk about feature development. Just recall what a SiLA feature is. A SiLA feature is a logical unit that divides a SiLA server into parts, into modules. And each of these modules consists of commands and properties. These features should be minimalistic and as generic as possible to be reusable. By that, you generate modules that can be assembled in different ways and speed up the whole server development process dramatically. So how do you develop such a feature? The first important thing is that you think about what your server, your new SiLA server should look like, what features it should have. And the best way to do that is to take a piece of paper and a pencil or a plain text editor and then just write down what how the server should be designed. So let's just do that to give you an example how to do that. So here's a plain text editor, so nothing fancy, just something like a Word notepad, and then you start drafting your feature. Let's make an example, a simple example. Let's just specify a SiLA server for a thermal shaker. So you start writing down SiLA server design for a thermal shaker. This device should have two features. So let's say it has a temperature control. So SiLA feature temperature control, and a second feature should be the SiLA feature, the shaking control. So each of these features consists, as I try to explain, of commands and properties. So commands and properties. Let's just copy that also here. And then you start thinking of what commands this SiLA server should receive and handle. A very natural command for a temperature control would be to set temperature. Set temperature. Another one would be to get the current temperature. Current temperature. Then a property could be, for example, the get max temperature or get min temperature. So let's say that's enough for the temperature control. You can of course make this much more complex, but for the sake of demonstration, that's not fine. And now for the shaking control, there's also a natural command: set shaking speed, get shaking speed, so you to get the current shaking speed. Then you could set the shaking duration and get shaking, current shaking duration, and the property would be to get the total shaking time, for example. So if you have a device that needs maintenance after a while, then you could ask the device how long it was used in total. And additionally, you could specify like foreseeable errors. So you could already think about error handling. So one error could be shaking speed out of range error. Yeah, so this is good enough as an example. And now let's go back to the next steps. So before you continue making these features or formulating these features in a standardized way, you should have a look on our SiLA feature repository on SiLA base. So let's just go there. So you find this is our SiLA base repository on GitLab, and here you find a folder called SiLA features. In here there are already a collection of features. Just have a look there. Alternatively, you can browse our documents. So just go to this docs button, and then here on top menu you see the core features and all features listed. Even features listed by categories. So and then you should go through these features and see if something fits already. And you see there's already a feature called temperature controller. So that means that you can have a look on this feature and see if what was formulated here fits to your needs, and if it fits, then you don't need to, then you're set. Then you don't need to further develop that. Then you can just reuse it. So let's just say this is fine for us. Then let's look if there's also a shaking feature. Shaking feature, and so there's nothing. So for that we have to write our own feature then. So how would you do that? That's now what's the tutorial is all about. The best starting point is to have a look on our standard feature. Let's just go to SiLA servers, for example, this feature here. And what we need is the first of all the head of this file. To go there, just go to our feature definitions on SiLA base, then SiLA standard.org, and then the core features can be found in this folder here. There's the SiLA service feature, and if you click on it, you need this part here, the head of this XML file. Copy it, and to develop a feature, I would highly recommend to use an intelligent IDE like PyCharm, IntelliJ, or Visual Studio Code. because they highly support you with the development of such XML files, as I can show you in a second. So let's just open such an IDE. So this is now Visual Studio Code, and I'm pasting the head of this XML file into my editor. And then you can see already it's very helpful to close this feature. So I opened the feature tag and now closing it. The nice thing about this IDE is that it really helps you supporting developing it. So if I open a tag, let's just do it. You see it already proposes possible options. The first thing you should do is specifying an identifier. And in our case, we would like to have a shaking controller feature. So let's call it shaking controller feature. By the way, you should, before designing a feature, you should have a look on our specifications of features in SiLA part A of the SiLA specification. If you go down here to feature definitions and then best practices or feature identifiers, you see there are recommendations on how you should name your features, how you should write them, how you should describe them. So it's before starting really defining a new feature, please read all about this feature definition in part A of the SiLA specifications. We have for different use cases different endings of these names. So we have controllers for active features, providers for passive features, and services for features that do both active control something and just provide some data information. For example, this is how you should name these features, and you should use camel case as I did here in this example. So what is then the next tag? The next, so a display name is required. This display name is a human readable name, so you could use something similar but with spaces. It's nicer to read. And then you should also specify a description. So and here it's very important that you be very precise about the behavior of your feature, the states of your features. So you should really explain what your feature does and be very clear about what you want to achieve. Let's just a feature for controlling shaking, controlling a shaking device. So, okay, the next part will be, and here you can now select between command, data type definitions, defined execution error, metadata property. We'll start with command. So let's just go back to our draft here. So this is exactly same structure as we want to implement, and here's the first command. So command, I'll just copy that. It's easy if you have already written it. So the command has again an identifier, and then you have also a display name, so you can use something nicer than just the camel case. And then you should also have a description here, clear to set the shaking speed of the thermo shaker. So okay, next would be discrimination if this command is observable or not observable. And here you have the choices between yes and no. We say no. If you say yes, then you could monitor a certain behavior over time and get updates of the values. So for example, if you would like to monitor the temperature over a certain time interval or over a longer time, you could make this observable. But for setting the shaking speed, this doesn't is not necessary. Okay, so we don't want an observable command. Then you should specify the parameter. In this case, we specify the speed. So speed. Again, this has a parameter, an identifier, shaking speed. Okay, and again a display name, shaking speed. This is again human readable. A description, so the speed to shake, for example, as a description. And then we need to say if it's specify the data type of this parameter. And since we don't need something very specific, we can use just a basic SiLA type. Let's just use an integer here, and we are set. So this is then the first command. So now we have specified the first command, and we need to do that now for all of these commands. I skip for the sake of shortness. I'll skip this, and let's just see how properties work. So let's just specify a property. It's very similar. So you have again an identifier here, and we would like to have a get total shaking time property. Okay. Then a display name, similar here, get total shaking time, and a description, get the total shaking time of the thermo shaker since it was installed, for example. Okay, and then again we need to say if this feed property is observable, yes or no. We don't need a observable property here. and then data type should be basic, so that this is the type of the return type, and then we could return a integer, for example. We should also specify in which unit. This is in hours. So, okay, this is how we specify a property, and now finally let's just specify a defined execution error. Again, you have an identifier, and we want to have this shaking speed out of range error here. So shaking speed out of range error, display name, a nice display name, okay, and then description, shaking speed went out of range. Okay, so this is, now we have specified an a foreseeable execution error. Okay, so by that we have a very simple shaking controller feature specified, and that we can then use in further processing. Let's just go back to our presentation. So you see this informal notion of your features went into a formalized way with in XML syntax. By the way, this XML syntax can then be validated against our feature definition schema, which you find on our SiLA base repository. So just let's go back to SiLA base, and then here is a schema folder, and here's a feature definition schema, and this can be used to validate the XML file for the feature definition. Okay, so this feature here. So just save that, and then the next steps will be explained in the next tutorial about how to process this feature definition language file. So let's go back to our. So what are the next steps now? We have in SiLA Python a nice tool which we call silacodegenerator, and that compiles the this XML file into a skeleton of a SiLA server and a SiLA client. So you then only need to fill the missing hardware connection gaps, and by that you have then already a running prototype of your SiLA client and server. You need to test everything, and then you can already work with it. So it's a very fast process, as I tried to explain. So what will come next? So in the next tutorials I will talk about the SiLA code generator, how to install it, of course, how to set up the whole development environment for a SiLA Python development. And then in further tutorials I will also show you a full working example, real-world example of a a multi-feature device, just that you see all the tricks and where you should change things. And by that I thank you for your attention and listening to this tutorial, and hope I see you in later tutorials. And by that, goodbye.